Non-stop Vikings talk. It's Purple Daily on Score North and ScoreNorth.com.
Will the Vikings draft a running back that they developed to pair with Alexander Mattison? Will another team that hopes to address the running back position just fail to address it the way they'd like to as a result of basic numbers and work out a deal to trade for Cook? But the bottom line is this: he ain't getting $10.4 million this year. That's what he needs to come to terms with. That's what his agent needs to come to terms with. If they trade that contract, they're not trading 10.4. Now, maybe he'll sign an extension that pays out 10.4 this year and signing bonus money that gets spread over multiple years. But he's not getting $10.4 million for this year alone. No one's going to pay him that.
Dropping the hammer on Dalvin Cook and his, I think, like 30-year-old agent. 28-year-old agent, something like that. Is it Zach Hiller? We saw a clip from him yesterday.
Yep.
He made a 30 under 30 list. He's negotiating on behalf of Dalvin Cook. So anyhow, this is Purple Daily, daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die. And every single Tuesday leading up to the draft, we bring in our friend and one of the foremost draft experts and authorities from fantasy pros and betting pros, Thor Nystrom.
Good to be back, boys. Good to be talking draft again in the Vikes.
You know, you got all those helmets behind you. Yeah, I feel like next Tuesday, or maybe at the draft party, which we'll talk about, if you could just wear a helmet the whole time while you're doing the show.
I might have to if they take Ken and Hooker, because I'll be banging my head on the table.
If you want to see Thor bang his head on a table live and in person, he's going to join us for the second chunk of the first round, the Surly Draft Party at Park Tavern in St. Louis Park, April 27th at 6 p.m. That's a week from Thursday. No cover charge. We are super excited to see as many of you guys as possible. 6 o'clock start time. We're going to start streaming on the Purple Daily YouTube channel around 7 o'clock or so. And unlike last year, when there were some weather issues and wind and rain and whatever, it's indoors, and there's a spillover area if it gets too crowded, sort of a heated outdoor tent that will have TVs and everything, beverages, Surly's. Before I die, we'll be there.
Before I die, back.
Yes.
Back for one night. Enjoy it with cans as well, which is, by the way, a new can from last year. This event is shaping up to be one of the great events of the year.
It's going to be a blast. And, hey, a shout out to TCL, back for another year on Purple Daily.
Thank you.
An official partner of the NFL and Purple Daily. No matter what you watch, TCL has award-winning TVs for any budget, any space, all with stunning picture quality. TCL makes more than just TVs. They offer mobile products, audio devices, home appliances. TCL brings you joy and simplicity through innovative technology. Gentlemen, we start with this fascinating Adam Schefter speculation. I don't think anything he says is speculation, though. I'm going to say report. Educated report, we'll say. Educated speculation. I don't know. Somewhere in there.
Okay.
He said, quote, "We've been hearing about quarterbacks going 1, 2, 3, and 4. That's a direct shot at Mel Kiper, by the way. That's not going to happen, I believe, in this draft, Schefter said. I think Indianapolis thinks there's a real chance right now that they could sit right where they are at 4 and get potentially the second quarterback off the board in this draft." Thor, what do you think of this? It's Adam Schefter, man. He is super calculated. He does not speak in opinion ever. He only speaks in fact or information exchange. When he comes out and says, "I don't know about all these mocks, I think the number 2 and number 3 picks could be non-quarterbacks." What do you make of this?
There's a shot. You know, we talked about last week how Houston might defer to Will Anderson in the second slot. Lance Zierlein, the Houston-based draft writer, he tweeted out yesterday that Houston might be even exploring a trade down from the number 2. But if they can't find that, or they have to go too far down the board and they don't want to move that far down, if they're stuck in that slot, seems like a distinct possibility that they take Will Anderson. I mean, unless they're doing the greatest smokescreen of all time, it does not seem like Houston is in on C.J. Stroud. So if they take Will Anderson there, then you have the Arizona pick. If Arizona gets stuck in that slot, we know that Arizona wants to trade down. But if teams are like, well, the quarterbacks are going to start to fall down here a little bit, maybe there isn't as much of a competition to blow Arizona away with an offer. If Arizona's stuck in that slot, assuredly they will not take a quarterback. They have Kyler Murray. So they would presumably take a defender as well. And that's how the second quarterback would get down to Indy.
Thor, I feel like the more speculation and, to Phil's point, pseudo reporting by guys like Schefter that we are hearing a week out essentially from the draft, the more that the forecast potentially calls for chaos.
Mm-hmm.
And this might be, and forgive me if it is, recency bias, because like we're preparing right now. But it just seems like there's a potential for more chaos in this draft and more unknowns than we ordinarily see. One, do you agree? And two, if you do, take me down the path in your mind of the type of chaos we might see here.
I definitely agree with that. Yeah, and where it starts with that scenario that we're just talking about. If Houston and Arizona get stuck in their slots and end up going defender because Houston doesn't like one of the other quarterbacks on the board, and because Arizona doesn't need a quarterback, now all of a sudden you have Indy. We could get chaos there too, because Indy's been one of the teams that is most in on Will Levis. So then you think about the possibility of, like, could CJ Stroud actually drop beneath the 5th pick, because Seattle probably will not take a quarterback. I wouldn't assume that they've been more in on the defenders. They obviously re-signed Geno to the contract extension earlier this offseason. Detroit ain't taking a quarterback at 6. So, I mean, like, it opens up trade possibilities potentially. But if those teams want to sit there, kid like Jalen Carter is there. Potential Seattle's been sniffing around him more at 6. I think Detroit loves Devin Witherspoon from Illinois. Those teams can't trade down too far and still get one of those guys, or Tyree Wilson for Seattle as well. If they trade down 7, 8 spots, whatever, they're not going to have access to those guys. So if they stay in those slots and they take defenders, that's how we could get CJ Stroud, like, previously an unforeseen circumstance where potentially he falls all the way to 7 if the Colts take Levis. And then from there, every single mock draft that has been put out to this point is just blown up. It's just detonated. It's like an NCAA tournament bracket when there's just a ton of upsets. Initially, everything's blown up, and then we're in uncharted waters. We don't know what's going to happen after that.
I gotta lay down. See you guys.
So the next logical question, because this is a Viking show. How could the Vikings potentially benefit from chaos, Thor?
Well, from the quarterback dropping down the board, we know that they've done more work on the quarterback class than they have in several years. And you have to assume that Kwesi is vetting all these different trade up scenarios. With the third one, we talked about how that could be cost prohibitive unless you're okay giving up your next 2 first-round picks and your third this year to do it. But now, if, in this scenario where potentially CJ Stroud gets down, to 5 or 6, I think that those teams, they like some of the defenders that are going to be there, but could they be incentivized to trade? We know that there was an enormous trade down the board last year, Minnesota and Detroit in the first round. What if we flipped it this time? And the Vikings are the ones moving up with the team that Kwesi just worked with in the first round last year, up to number 6 if CJ Stroud falls down there.
Hold on a second. I'm hyperventilating right now. Hold on. I'll gather myself. Okay, so
I'll tell you, this is amazing right now. I need to excuse myself.
So off that point too, here's what I think is intriguing. And I am literally trying to put the pieces of the puzzle together here, because there's a ton we don't know. And that's especially true about the Vikings, because, we've got one draft. Kwesi and O'Connell, in that case, didn't, have a full time of preparation and certainly the experience that they do now after a season. And Thor, I felt like the press conference, and these things are very touchy, like they're hard to read, but I don't know what your feeling was, but the Vikings pre-draft press conference held last week, O'Connell and Kwesi were asked a lot of questions about the quarterback position, rightfully so in particular. And just trying to read between the lines, I didn't hear anything of stop with those questions. We've got our guy, blah, blah, blah.
No.
They basically have said, and they're right, we've got to be looking for the next quarterback. And so, if anything, I think the Vikings' participation in potential chaos could be huge. And the more and more that we examine this, I'm not going to be surprised at all if they come away next Thursday night as we sit at Park Tavern sipping on Surly's with a quarterback who's among those top 4 now.
Wow.
It's in play. Yeah. I mean, and the chaos theory is what could facilitate that. Because, let's say the difference between trading for 6 instead of 3, the scenario we were talking about last week, you're not going to have to give up your next 2 first-round picks. You're going to have to give up your one next year. And Detroit, we know, would sort of be interested in that. They picked up the future first multiple times. They've been picking twice in some of these first rounds, going back the last couple of years, whatever, this year as well. So, I mean, that they're a team that likes to pick up assets. And again, like, people out there might be like, oh, they only have Jared Goff. Why wouldn't they just take a quarterback? Detroit is higher on Goff than any other organization. They're going to keep rolling it forward with Goff. So, I mean, like, in terms of being able to pick up extra assets, stuff like that, maybe they're thinking about their contingency with Jared Goff. Maybe if he turns into a pumpkin, we want another first-round pick as ammo next year because Caleb Williams of USC is coming out and Drake May of UNC is coming out. Maybe we just put our bullets into that one, but you're still going to be able to pick in the first round by moving down.
So you just painted this incredible but also plausible scenario where Houston and Arizona don't take quarterbacks, and teams don't desperately try to climb up to trade to the number 3. And then all of a sudden, and this is what Schefter is reporting too. I mean, Indianapolis then takes maybe Will Levis at 4, and all of a sudden now you got a scenario where Anthony Richardson and CJ Stroud are both available. Seattle at 5. Detroit at 6 is so interesting because the Vikings and the Lions have already made 2 huge trades with each other in the last 12 months. So why stop at 2, right? But and this is where I want your help because I'm looking at the old draft value chart where they assign, a number to each draft pick. I think if you were to move up to 3, which is what we talked about last week, it would cost you your 23 and so your 2023 first round pick number 23. You'd have to for sure obviously give that. And first round picks in 2024 and potentially 25 to get up to 3. It's less to get up to 6. And it may not seem like it because, well, what's the difference? There's a 600-point difference between the 3rd pick and the 6th pick. And so, correct me if I'm wrong here, Thor, but if the draft plays out that way, it would probably cost you 1 fewer future first rounder to move to like 6 than 3, right?
Sure would. The 600 points that you're referring to, that is the equivalent to the 31st pick in the draft. What usually in a normal year would be the second to the last pick of the first round. You're not going to have to give up the 2 first round picks to get to 6. You'll have to give up the 1 because you got to drive. What is that? A little bit less than 1,000 points, whatever.
So I did the math here. So you'd probably, if let's say Richardson or Stroud fell to 6, and these guys are like, man, I mean, we already have a great trading relationship with the Lions. Let's make this happen. I think you'd swap the 6 and the 23. You'd give Detroit the 87 and your next year's first round pick.
Oh, that would do it for sure. Yeah. I would try to grovel with them and try to give up less than the 3rd this year, but you're definitely going to have to give up your first next year. I mean, there's no doubt about that. Mm-hmm. But yeah, I mean, whether it's the 3rd that the Vikings have, or whether you could try to convince them to take one of those day 3 picks. But yeah, I mean, that's sort of the range that you're talking about to get to 6.
Mm-hmm.
Oh my God. This is so, there are so many potential tentacles off of this conversation. So let's say that they do this, okay? Let's say that the quarterbacks, that the top 4 start to fall a bit and they get Stroud. Okay. I think we all agree, and while Thor drives you crazy, if they get Hooker, he's coming off an ACL, he's going to sit. Like the ideal there is he's going to sit, learn, and get coached up. If you get Stroud, there's a case to be made he shouldn't sit. So what happens now? Because I don't think that you would take CJ Stroud at 6 if that had happened and park him for sure. Like Hooker, you would. But what happens then? Because now you've got Cousins, who's probably like, what the hell, right? And you're expediting his potential removal from the roster. So like imagine, and I do believe that Kwesi and O'Connell could be potential kings of chaos in the fact that they would embrace this opportunity, but that changes that shifts everything as far as quarterback is concerned. I think if it's one of those top 4 guys and if it's Stroud.
Yeah. With Stroud, you have to have the trade for Cousins worked out. or at least the parameters of it with another team before you make that move up for Stroud. Because I totally agree with you. CJ Stroud needs to be starting week 1 of next NFL season. And so if they get him, yeah, you got to trade Cousins. And hopefully, like we talked about in the last episode, if you trade Cousins, you can perhaps, and this could incentivize a team perhaps like the 49ers that wants to keep their remaining picks this year to plug their holes. And you're going to have to make this trade presumably during the draft or draft weekend, something like that. If you trade Cousins for future draft equity for picks next year, you could potentially, like we talked about, recoup exactly the amount of value or an analogous amount of value to the first rounder that you just sent out, whether you get a second and a third, or whether, like we talked about last time, putting the contingency on that pick of if the, the 49ers make it to the NFC Championship game, whatever, then it vests into a first rounder. That would be a way that you could just totally wash away the future equity that you've traded out. And then it's you're just swapping in Kirk for CJ Stroud at that point. And then the cap hit that you take this year, what does it matter? Because you're not going to be a Super Bowl contender this year. But then going forward, you have the quarterback on the rookie deal, the cheat code, where then it opens up an enormous amount of cap room on the back end of it, where the Vikings can now be way more active in free agency the next 3 years.
So here's this is where I will probably need someone smarter than me to figure out the cap ramifications. But let's say the draft falls your way, you trade up to get CJ Stroud, and now you're in, and you get to take a deep breath overnight because the draft stops after the first round, and you can now take a deep breath going into day 2. And the 49ers, by the way, don't have a pick anyways until the third round, right? They've got a bunch of third round picks. So you could in theory facilitate that trade if you wanted to between the first and the second days of the draft. You'd have some time to do that. But here's the thing. If you were to trade Kirk post June 1st, his cap hit instead of $20 million for this year would be, I believe, $38 million. Let me plug this into the over the cap calculator. So yeah, you $38.7 million would be his cap hit for this year, because everything would move up into 2023, and now you're $17 million over the cap. So you could restructure O'Neal and save 10. You got a Hawkinson deal you could work through. Zadar, like there's ways to clear out guys here, but you'd have a lot of work on your hands to get back under the cap at some point. You could post June 1st designate trade Kirk Cousins, and you would have $28 million on your books for next year in dead money, but you'd have a rookie scale contract quarterback. But my question there is, and this is where I'm too dumb to know the answer, if you did a post June 1st designated trade next week on Kirk, would it have to be for draft picks that are in 2024? You know what I'm saying? Like, could they send you the draft picks for 2023, but the Kirk side of it isn't consummated until post June 1st? I don't know, but there's all sorts of ways you could finagle this if you did find your quarterback of the future next Thursday.
Yeah, I don't think so. I think the way that it would be constituted probably is trading for the future equity. But yeah, I mean, like if you were able to hammer the thing out on, late Thursday night, or on, obviously you have all day Friday till the draft starts up again. What is it, 6 p.m. or whatever on Friday night, and you work it out then. You take the smaller cap hit, you could potentially take some of the 49ers picks this year. But I just like sort of the symmetry of, if you've traded your first rounder next year, attempting to make the Cousins trade to just recoup that draft value. Because if you're starting CJ Stroud this year, you could have a very frisky team, but I don't think that they're a Super Bowl contender. So I would want to clear the cap space going forward and get the draft equity going forward. And then this year, just sort of, get by with what you got.
On Stroud, what's your analysis of how prepared he would be to step in? And not that I would expect great things in year one, but just not get that year of potentially being on the sideline and being able to observe, learn, and be coached. Is he prepared to step in and take off from there, or would there be some concerns there, do you think?
No, I think he's ready to start right now. Is he ready to be a star in the NFL right away? Probably not. Like, sure. I mean, he's probably going to need a year or so, but he's the most accurate quarterback in this class. He's more accurate than Bryce Young, and his placement's better too. So now a lot of the other stuff Bryce Young's got him at. Like Bryce Young is a way better processor of the field, but Bryce Young, that's what his superpower is. It's the reason that he's going to go first overall. CJ Stroud, the Ohio State system was way more wide open and stuff like that. So he would get guys in space, and then he would do the thing of just fitting the ball through a keyhole, whatever. You want to get him acclimated into an NFL offense where there's more traffic around and he has to sort of work through the progressions if one thing's not there, whatever. But we've already seen him go through all the progressions at Ohio State. It's just the spacing is going to be more condensed in the NFL because he doesn't have, the freak athletes on the outside going up against, Nebraska's cornerbacks or whatever, and being able to throw those one-on-ones.
No. Oh man, this is quite the round of reckless draft speculation here, boys. I don't know what to do with myself, but there's other questions we want to throw at you. We will do a mock draft simulation as well, but a shout out to our friends over at Livia, helping Purple Daily listeners get in the best shape of their lives, Judd.
That's right. And here's the thing too. It's Livia Weight Control Centers. So as I keep saying, we're not talking about a diet. We're not talking about a fad. We're talking about a long-term solution. And I've heard from and am appreciative. So many of you have, like I did, given them a shot. And you look at the guy on the left, you look at the guy on the right. And that's both Sports Dad. But it's Sports Dad on the right. Lean, mean, fighting machine, like a lot of you, because Livia works. And here right now is a deal that they just debuted yesterday. You join today, you get 3 months for free. That's right, 3 months for free. That's enough time where you're going to go into summer looking great and feeling great. And you too will be a lean, mean, fighting machine. And they're going to help you keep the pounds off, which is the most important thing. 855-GO-LIVIA, Livia.com, Livea.com for a program that works, and for a new you, Livia.com.
And you look better in your golf clothes too, like Declan. You could wear those little, Ricky Fowler colored pants without feeling insecure or ashamed.
Yep, no problem shooting over 100 if I look like Ricky. That's kind of been my motto for a very, very long time. And I would be doing it at the Meadows at Mystic Lake. Go to golfthemeadows.com to learn more. You can stay up to date on tee time information. You got the 10-round value pack as well, which gives you access to tee times. And you can maybe even drill some putts like me. Like when I went to the Meadows at Mystic Lake and shockingly drilled putts on one take, no matter what Phil Mackey or Judd Zolgad think. That was one take.
Pull the flag.
Okay. No. You keep that flag in. Please keep that flag in.
Pull the flag.
Go to golfthemeadows.com to learn more and stay up to date.
And our friends at Dennis Kirk as well are helping you out for riding season, which teased us last week. Now, it's 55 and sunny today in the Twin Cities. Whatever it is you ride, a Harley, Indian, Metric Cruiser, sport bike, you'll find what you need at DennisKirk.com so you can ride more and wait less. Over 180,000 parts and accessories in stock, clothing and helmets as well. Shipping is free for orders over $89. If you order by 8 p.m., they ship the same day. Everything you need for your ride at DennisKirk.com. So just to continue the quarterback discussion here, because it's very obvious the Vikings are planning on maybe making a big move here, or we'll see how the draft plays out. We've seen a couple mock drafts, Thor, in the Mockosphere send Tanner McKee and or Dorian Thompson-Robinson to the Vikings. Let's talk about both those guys for a second, because we've talked so much about the top 5 quarterbacks, if you include Hendon Hooker in there. My worry about this is if you look historically, and this is just my own sort of, crack research, but the last 20 years, first-round quarterbacks only pan out, and when I say pan out, and this is my own subjectivity here, but were you an above-average quarterback for a multi-year stretch? I think that's my definition of pan out. Now, obviously, there's Patrick Mahomes panning out, and there's Andy Dalton in the second round panning out. They're both hits, but one's a Hall of Famer. So I said there's 47% that panned out in the first round. That number drops to 16% in the second and third rounds the last 20 years. 5% fourth round or later, if you're talking about multi-year starters who are above average. So that's what worries me a little bit about the Tanner McKee, Dorian Thompson-Robinson bin, where it's like, yeah, you're taking a shot, but it's really like a 1 in 7, maybe 1 in 8 chance that guy becomes an above average multi-year starting quarterback. What are your thoughts on those guys?
Yeah, well, I have Tanner McKee ranked right around where I have Hendon Hooker ranked. I have them both as third round players. So, I mean, if you're talking the third round, or if McKee gets into the fourth, a lot of the 7-round mocks have him getting into the fourth. Yeah, I'd absolutely take a shot on Tanner McKee. I think he would work well in the Viking system too. He's your big prototypical pocket passer. He's six. Let's see, he was listed at 6'6". At the combine, he was 6'5" and 5'8", 231 pounds. But he's a little bit more athletic than people give him credit for. He had an 88th percentile size adjusted athletic composite during the pre-draft process. And before in the Stanford offense, like in 2021, he would just sit back there in the pocket and they didn't move him around much. So I sort of thought he was lead-footed. But last year, we got to see more of the bootleg stuff because Stanford had put this weird Wake Forest, Dave Clawson, their coach, they run this thing called the slow mesh or whatever, and then they use like RPO off it and stuff like that. And Stanford's offense had been so terrible for so many years, and David Shaw was apparently getting ready to walk away from the job, which he did after the season, that they just decided to do something crazy and put slow mesh stuff in there. But what you got to see with that was Tanner McKee bootlegging around a lot more. He moves really fluidly to the perimeter, and he throws accurately on the run. Those tapes or those plays are littered all over his tape from last year. I think that would appeal to the Vikings as well. And he's a guy who can attack all three levels of the field. He has the requisite arm strength to threaten the defense deep. And he's mechanically sound as well. He's a guy who's worked really, really hard on that kind of stuff and is multiple year starter in the Power 5. I do think that there's a little bit of upside there. I don't think there's a ton of quarterbacks in this class who, if they hit their ceiling, they could be an NFL starter. Is he ever going to be a star in the NFL? No. But like, could he become, like a 16th, 17th, 18th best quarterback in the NFL? If he hits his ceiling, yeah, I think so. But like you mentioned, the hit rate is lower on, when you're going to get into the middle rounds like that. But if I'm going to take a shot on one of those guys, you're throwing a dart. He'd be the guy that I would want to throw on, after those top 5 guys, whatever. Or 4 guys.
I wonder because out of high school, we were going over this list on the show yesterday or 2 days ago. He received offers from basically every top college football program. I mean, Alabama, Auburn, Florida, Texas, USC, Tennessee, Georgia, UCLA. I think like Ohio State and Michigan might be the only 2 top programs that didn't offer him out of high school. And I just wonder, you choose Stanford, which is great. And, you get that great education, go to Stanford, but their cupboards in terms of talent are just barren the last couple of years. Mac Jones goes to Alabama a few years ago and gets to put up 41 touchdowns, 4 interceptions, and 77% completions because he's driving a college Ferrari. And I just wonder, where would Tanner McKee's draft stock be if he had chosen to play at Tennessee, right, in that offensive system, or if he had played at Alabama with all those NFL wide receivers and offensive linemen and whatnot, and he puts up 35 touchdowns and 6 picks instead of the Stanford numbers. I wonder where he would be at stock-wise and perception-wise if he went somewhere besides Stanford.
If he played for Josh Heupel in college like Hendon Hooker got to do, he would be the guy that is the dark horse first rounder. It might not even be a dark horse. He might just be viewed as a first-round pick. Your point's well taken. Total opposite deal at Stanford. It was a bad offensive line, and he only really had one good receiver, but that kid was on and off the field. Michael Wilson, who's one of my favorite sleepers in the receiver class. But with him, he has to stay on the field. But he was, like I said, on and off the field at Stanford. And then there wasn't a ton of system continuity either, because then they go and change the offense on him heading into his senior year. But we already have a proof of concept of this in the recent past. Remember Davis Mills? He was the guy that McKee took over for at Stanford. Davis Mills was also a guy who statistically he paled in comparison to some of the other guys in the class when he came out, just because he played in the Stanford system. But like you see him, he went into the NFL, taken in the 3rd round by the Texans. Was it 1 pick ahead of the Mon pick or
After.
2 picks? After. Ooh, that was a mistake by the Vikings. But like you saw, Mills falls down there just because of the situation he's in. And he's a guy who, obviously has exceeded expectations, but is, he's a below average starter, but he is an NFL starter, and he hasn't necessarily embarrassed himself, especially when you consider the talent that Houston has around him.
Mm-hmm.
So, Thor, here's a question. Let's say that the Vikings try to trade up to 6 or 3, doesn't work. They're stuck at 23. I think the early mocks, of course, had cornerbacks, a lot of cornerbacks. Then it felt like it shifted to receivers. Now it's a lot of quarterback steam. But let me throw this curveball at you. With Danielle Hunter not reporting for the, just to be clear, voluntary offseason program, but wanting a new contract, and with there being a fighting chance that the Vikings say no, and that he says, okay, that's fine, then I'm not going to play here. And Zadarius Smith, having pieced out, asked for his release, didn't get it, but let's just say that blows up as well. Do we need to be considering that the Vikings very well might take a rush end, a rush linebacker in the 3-4 with the 23rd pick based on what is going on, which I'm guessing the Vikings are prepared for, but we really didn't know officially until the Jeremy Fowler report that Danielle Hunter wasn't going to show up, and there is debate here, should the Vikings pay him? What do you think are the chances of this turning into a pass rushing end?
Yeah, well, I mean, if inside the building that there's, that Zadarius isn't coming back, seems like that's the case. And then if you think that there's a strong chance, or it's just going to happen that Hunter is not going to play for a year, already starting to explore trade for him, whatnot, then yeah, I mean, that moves right to the top of the list, right up probably even above wide receiver 2, which we've been banging on the drum for, and right up there with cornerback, and probably even above it. Because at that point, you only have Marcus Davenport, who you signed on the 1-year flyer. You're hoping on him.
Yep.
And then what would you have on the other side? So, yeah, I mean, you'd have to move that way up there.
Yeah. So interesting, man. There's just, and I wonder how many scenarios. I'm sure they've got 10 or 12 different scenarios they're planning for here, right? All right, here's our quarterback scenarios. Okay, if it plays out where there's 4 quarterbacks off the board in the first 10 picks, okay, that means there's all these other positions that we could potentially go for too. So your latest mock, we talked about it last week. Quentin Johnston, right? Or no, Jordan Addison. Which one? You had a receiver going to the Vikings at 23.
Yeah, I think it was. Let me pull it up. I think I had Jordan Addison going to the Vikings.
Yeah. So is it if it's not quarterback in the first round, how would you rank based on where you think the draft is headed and where you think the value is? If the Vikings stand pat at 23, where do you think the value is? Are you leaning receiver still like your mock last week, or is it another position?
I'd say receiver or corner, depending on the corner that's there. And then the sort of wild card with the corner thing, we talked about this in the past, is Brian Branch, because he listed as a safety, but he's not. He's a nickel defender. Now, in that scenario, you'd have to move Murphy outside. You've already told him he's going to be playing a lot in the nickel, but we know that he can play on the outside. But that's another one that would plug one of the holes. But it with the cornerback thing, it all depends on what goes above you. The 2 guys at the very top we know aren't going to be there. Witherspoon and Gonzalez are probably both going to go in the top 10. Joey Porter likely is going to be gone very soon after that. Does Deonte Banks get down to you? And then would you consider Deonte Banks? If Deonte Banks is gone too, though, I think you're just deferring that position to later or whatever, because you're going to have to reach. And, unless it's a guy like Brian Branch. I think Brian Branch is a fit. But, yeah, outside of that, I remain on team draft the second wide receiver. I want to keep my comments short, though, on this, because I seen KJ Osborne was getting after people on Twitter this week who were saying the Vikings needed a wide receiver, too.
Just don't say they suck.
Okay.
Don't say the wide receivers all suck behind Jefferson.
I saw a bunch of Vikings players piling on some negative Vikings bloggers / podcasters out there. All right, they all have rabbit ears. They're all listening.
That was a fun day on Twitter.
Well, boys, maybe we should just do another simulation here.
I want to mock.
Come on. What do you think? All right, let's pop this up on the old screen for the YouTube audience. We will explain it and navigate it. There we go. Dex has it. So this is the Pro Football Focus mock draft simulator. And we will choose the Vikings with the 23rd pick. As you can see the settings there. Okay. We're going to enter the draft. So does anyone have any thoughts? So I have it as a 5-round mock. We could try and deal Dalvin to, I got the latest odds here from one of the odds websites that the Dolphins are now the odds-on favorite for Dalvin Cook's team in 2023 with the Vikings second behind them.
Dolphins need a back. I thought they took care of their
That's the weird thing. They already have, don't they already have situation. like two veteran running backs on that team?
So.
Well, it's Mostert, right? Is their projected starter, I think.
But hey, that's what the odds are saying. So
Okay.
I guess my question is, before we start this mock draft simulation, do you want to try and trade Dalvin to Miami and just see what happens?
Yeah, let's do it.
Yeah,
Okay.
absolutely.
So Miami, they do have a second round pick. I don't think we're getting a second for Dalvin, but let's see here. Okay. So Dalvin so there's the 51, there's the 84, there's the 197. Should we see if they'll give the 84?
Yeah.
It says they will.
Wow. Will they give the 51?
Wow, you're getting kind of greedy now.
Somebody
Thor.
fix this thing.
No, it says no.
Somebody fix this machine. The 84. They ain't giving the 84.
A third. So yeah, Judd's our chief reality officer here. Thor's our GM as we navigate this mock draft simulation. It does feel like a bit of a heist, but it's the Pro Football Focus mock simulator. I mean, and
they say 100%.
All right.
The 84th pick for Dalvin Cook.
Yeah.
1,200 yards last year, 8 touchdowns, 4.5 yards a carry, another Pro Bowl appearance.
Yeah.
They're lucky we're not trying to get that 51st pick. So, all right, we're going to offer this. All right, well, there we go. We just traded Dalvin Cook to the Miami Dolphins for... They're the odds-on favorite.
The Dolphins just all got fired. Their front office got blown out.
So, boys, we now have the 23, the 84, the 87, the 119, the 158, and the 211 going into this 5-round mock simulation. We're going to start the draft. Let's see if there's any chaos like last week. We'll just do a couple off the bat here. Okay, Bryce Young, number 1 to the Panthers. CJ Stroud, number 2 to the Texans. Jalen Carter, number 3 to the Colts. Let's rattle off the 4th pick here, too. My guess is it's Will Levis or Anthony Richardson. It's Anthony Richardson, 4 to the Colts. So this is fairly standard. I think Jalen Carter going a little higher than maybe most mocks have him. But any reason at this point, with Will Levis being the last of the 4 quarterbacks, any reason to think about trading up here, Thor?
Not in this scenario. This is the non-chaos scenario, and we're not giving up all those future picks for Will Levis. In this scenario, the Raiders would be crying if they seen the Colts take Anthony Richardson. I know for a fact the Raiders like Anthony Richardson, so they're hoping that the Colts take Levis or potentially Stroud.
Okay. Well, let's rattle off a few more here and see what happens. There's Will Levis to the Raiders, by the way. A big cornerback run. Oh, your guy, Quentin Johnston. So I'm going to pause it here after the 13th pick. So here's what we've got. We've got cornerback run, Devin Witherspoon, Christian Gonzalez, Joey Porter Jr. all gone. And then the first 2 receivers, Quentin Johnston and Jackson Smith-Njigba, go to the Eagles and the Texans.
Yeah, one thing I'll say about this is I also have heard some whispers that the Raiders do not like Will Levis. So this is one scenario where if the Raiders bypass Levis, because of course they have Jimmy Garoppolo and they have Hoyer, whatever, that could be a scenario where Levis starts dropping down the board. And then you wouldn't, he's not going to fall all the way to 23. But if he gets into the teens, there's not a ton of teams around here that are looking at quarterback. Then you could potentially think to trade up if that scenario happened.
Interesting. Okay, meat and potatoes. A lot of offensive tackles coming off here. Lucas Van Ness, the Iowa edge rusher, to the Packers at 15. Kalijah Cansey. So we can't see, for some reason, they don't let us see like available players until it's our pick. But just kind of based on how you see the board here, Thor, is there any reason at all to think about trading up, or should we just let the pick come to us here and see what happens?
I think we got to stand pat, see what happens.
All right. So, and we'll see how many offers come in. We may be able to trade back, and that might be the place. We have 3 teams interested here. Let's see who those 3 teams are as we are on the clock with the 23rd overall pick. It says the Giants at 25, the Eagles at 30, and then the Raiders coming up from the second round at 38 are all interested in consummating a trade for the 23rd pick. I will show you which players are available here. So you can decide, do we want to stand pat, make a pick, or do we want to trade back to 25 or 30 or 38?
Brian Branch, your guy.
Yeah, Branch is of interest here. Keep scrolling.
And he may not be there if you trade back, too. That's the thing.
But at the same time, you got
Bijan
Robinson. Oh, Bijan's there. And we just traded Delvin. Oh, man, we would have to think about Bijan here. My boy Zay Flowers is there, too.
I'd say trade back because...
Let's trade with the Giants, because a couple of those guys will, at least one of them guys is still going to be there.
And you got tight end, tackle are the best BPAs on the board right now. Those aren't needs for the Vikings. So I would move back a couple spots.
Yeah, I agree. And Jordan Addison's still there. There's multiple guys here that the Vikings would be interested in.
Okay, real quick on Bijan Robinson, because I was trying to force this on Judd the other day. I am fascinated by Bijan Robinson in a Kevin O'Connell system. What is his? So, he didn't catch a ton of passes. Is he a guy that's going to catch 50, 60 passes and be a first 2 downs back? What's his outlook in the NFL?
Oh, he's a very good receiver. Sometimes they would take him out on third downs because Roschon Johnson, who's another draft guy in this class, a middle round prospect, he had to see the field at some point or whatever. And he was Roschon's a better pass blocker, but Bijan is a very skilled receiver, both out of the backfield, and you can put him out in the slot as well.
Okay. So here's what we're going to do with the Giants here. So you think we can trade back 2 and maybe still get Bijan Robinson and or whoever else, I guess.
Yeah, and if not Branch or one of those receivers for sure.
Okay, so we're going to trade back here. It says if we do the 23 and the 25 swap and ask for the 89th from the Giants, it's a 55% chance of being accepted.
Done and done.
Let's see what happens. Let's try and fleece him here. Nah.
Can we toss a pick in? Late runner?
Give him 211.
211. 60% chance.
Screw them.
The 158. 72% chance.
Yeah,
okay.
I'll get done.
Let's offer this.
Yeah.
Uh-oh. There it is. Uh-oh.
Thank you for doing business.
We're just stockpiling those picks.
Oh, the Giants take Branch. Look at this. And the Jaguars take Darnell Wright.
Well,
so we're sitting here at 25,
there.
and Bijan Robinson is still on the board.
Yeah, I think we might have to take Bijan here. We haven't done it yet. Let's take him.
Yeah, I just quit.
With the 25th pick in the 2023 NFL Draft, the Minnesota Vikings select Bijan Robinson. I'm going to go fast so we can get to the 80s here, and we'll just stand pat at 84 and 87 and see who's on the board. All right? Okay, here we go. Ooh, Tank Dell.
I do like Tank, but you got to play him in the slot because he's so small, 165 pounds.
He's 165
pounds.
No.
You just can't play him on the outside. And the Vikings are playing in 12 personnel so much. Either Hawkinson or Oliver can be in the slot all the time. So I just don't think he's a fit. I do like his game, but yeah, I just don't think he's a fit for the Vikings.
What about that edge from Wisconsin?
Herbig, I would play Herbig at linebacker. He sort of caught between the two, but who was the kid a couple years ago? Leo Chenal was kind of Wisconsin just uses some of their linebacker edge defender like that. But I would put him at linebacker, and I wouldn't see linebacker as a need right now.
You let us know what you want us to. So we have 2 picks here in the next 4, 84 and 87.
Okay, let's check out the cornerback. I want to see the cornerbacks, and I guess the full receivers too.
Okay, we'll put them both on here for you. Okay, corners and receivers. Tank Dell being number 1 on both the PFF and average draft position board.
So Michael Wilson actually would be a fit. He was funny enough. He was the guy I was talking about a little bit ago, the guy that had a hard time staying on the field at Stanford. But when he was on the field, he was really, really good. Mm-hmm. He has this superpower of stopping on a dime that was actually tracked by the Zebra system at the Senior Bowl. He was top 5 amongst all the players there, regardless of position, in max deceleration. And he's over 6'2" and like 215 pounds. So he can shake people.
I kind of like that. I mean, dude, if you're feeling Michael Wilson, let's pull the trigger and make it happen.
He's a true outside receiver. I'm down with that.
There it is. Michael Wilson, come on down. You are the next number 2 wide receiver for the Minnesota Vikings. All due respect to KJ Osborne.
I rank him right next to Tank Dell. On my board right now, I have Tank Dell wide receiver 8. I have Wilson wide receiver 9, but they're super close overall. And like I said, much better fit for the Vikings because Wilson for sure plays on the outside.
We'll show you. So we're back at so we have actually the 87 and the 89 here. So we have a ton of picks. And by the way, the 87th pick is presented by our friends at Manscaped, Declan.
Speaking of top picks, I'm going to hit you at the chimes one more time here. Okay, well, let's talk about a 1-2 punch of men's grooming, which is obviously the Lawnmower 4.0 and the Beard Hedger. You need to take care of things upstairs. You need to take care of things downstairs. These are picks 1 and 2 in your NFL draft. You don't want to look like Matt Patricia. You want to look like Sean McVay, okay? No one wants to look like Matt Patricia. So if you look like a Patricia and you want to look like more like a McVay, go to Manscaped and check out with promo code PURPLE 20% off, gets you free shipping and 20% off all products at Manscaped. In the checkout, put promo code PURPLE. It helps us out at Purple Daily. It helps Manscaped out as well. They're a proud sponsor of Purple Daily and their programming here. Use promo code PURPLE for 20% off and free shipping at Manscaped.
All right. Thor, we're showing you here on the screen. This is the list of available quarterbacks, cornerbacks, edge rushers, and interior defensive linemen.
Okay, I like Isaiah McGuire, but he's a 4-3 defensive end. Might be harder to play him on the interior, and he's not an outside linebacker guy. So I think he's more of a fit for a different system. Brooks and Turner, I don't know for what the Vikings do, because on the interior they need more of the nose tackle guy, so that they, to platoon with Tonga potentially. That's why I've been interested in the big space eating guys in there. Siaki Ika, I think, is already off the board, but we talked about Jared Clark, and then Broderick Martin is another guy from Western Kentucky, but they can be taken later. Right here, the most attractive name I've seen so far is Darius Rush. From South Carolina, a guy who rose throughout the process. He was actually the fastest guy at the Senior Bowl in terms of their tracking of the speed. And then I think he ran low 4.4s at the combine. He would probably be the corner that I'm most interested from these guys that I'm seeing.
All right, let's do it. Darius Rush to the Minnesota Vikings with the 87th overall pick. And now we're back on the clock again at 89 after Marvin Mims, receiver, goes to the Jaguars.
Oh man, I like Marvin Mims a lot. I miss Marvin Mims. Let's see. So what we've taken: running back,
receiver.
Oh wait, you got the receiver. Oh,
Yep.
That's right.
Yeah.
And cornerback. And so we
now
could use interior defensive line is definitely still a thing. We do have the 119. Yeah, edge rusher, especially if the Vikings wind up moving on from either of those guys, Zadarius or Danielle Hunter.
Yeah, let's look at those two front seven positions, the edge and interior defensive line. You could even toss linebacker in there too. They're going to be looking to get rid of Hicks pretty soon.
Okay, we'll toss a little linebacker in here. See what happens.
Down here. Okay. Dorian Williams. I'm a big fan of Dorian Williams' game. He's shorter and he's smaller, but he's super duper athletic and he has crazy long arms. It's one of the reasons why it's sort of deceiving his frame, because his wingspan is absolutely enormous and he also disrupts passes. Let's see who else is down here. Ivan Pace I like too. He didn't test as well as we thought he was going to test. It would be my only concern there, but he creates a lot of havoc. I think
a lot of these guys will be here when we come back.
I think we go Dorian Williams here.
There it is. All right, from Tulane, linebacker Dorian Williams.
He's one of the best coverage linebackers in the class. Dorian.
And then one more pick here for us at 119.
Well, here, with that Garrett Williams falling down from Syracuse, he was the guy we talked about before that's coming off the knee injury. But, if he falls this far down the board, he'd be an objective steal here. When will he come back during his rookie season? Is it going to be October? Is it going to be November? I'm not sure, but you will get him back at some point during the season, and he would have the highest upside of those guys right now. Jack, as far as these guys, not too interested in Jacqueline Roy. He was an early entrant that didn't test very well. I don't really know why he came out. Colby Wooden is an undersized tweener between interior defensive line and edge. I don't think he's a fit. There's that Broderick Martin that I was talking about, the Western Kentucky kid. That kid is friggin' enormous. His dimensions that he came in at were, I'm just pulling it up right now, was he was 6'5", 330 coming in. The one who's even bigger is Jared Clark, not quite as tall, but 6'3", 334. And Jared Clark has a ridiculous reach for one of those enormous guys inside, 82-inch wingspan. Interestingly, Siaki Ika, who is the guy in that phylum that is always ranked ahead of him, his reach is only 75.5 inches, as far as the wingspan goes. So I would be thinking about Jared Clark here. Would be, I think. Yeah, I would take, Jared Clark or the Yaya Diaby from Louisville. Yaya Diaby, we haven't seen him as much. He didn't break out until the end of his career, but he tested as an athletic freak. And on film, you see just a super duper quick first step. He is that 3-4 outside linebacker that you just sick from the edge there. So he'd be another guy potentially think about.
And no love for Dorian Thompson-Robinson or any of the other quarterbacks here. Jake Haener, Clayton Tune, Stetson Bennett, all these guys still on the board.
For me, not yet. I because there's so many other needs. You can get a guy right here that is either going to be in a platoon immediately or is going to be your plan for 2024. I would prioritize those guys.
Guys, I just kind of like his name, Yaya Diaby. If you guys are down for it,
yeah, let's say Yaya.
Athletic freak edge rusher to the Vikings with the 119th pick, and that rounds out our 5-round mock here. Let's see what PFF has for a grade. You've nailed A and A- the last 2 weeks. We did not draft a quarterback here.
Uh-oh.
Oh, they're
going
giving us a
to kill us
for Bijan Robinson.
And a C- for Dorian Williams.
Oh,
and a
no.
B-.
B-.
Yeah, got a D, Phil.
Oh, no.
Oh, come on.
Great name, bad grade.
I gotta text Mike Renner about the Diaby grade they got. They're too low on Yaya.
What? Why does Bijan get a C?
I think it's just because PFF always ranks the running backs lower. Even with their draft slot, it's just part of their philosophy. So I think that's what that thing's all about. And they might even have a thing in their algorithm about the Vikings don't need a running back, even though we traded Dalvin Cook. So I'm not sure in this exercise. But Yaya Diaby, I'm looking at my sheets right now. He measured in 6'3", 263, 98th percentile athlete, was almost 99th. I compare him in my sheet to Boye Mafe, a guy that we're very familiar with.
Football. Let's go.
Boy. Go. I mean, it's almost draft day.
Can't wait, man. Yeah, we're super pumped to see as many of you as possible at the Surly Park Tavern draft party. No cover charge. Just come on in. You can cheers a beer with the sports dad himself, Judd Zulgad, and you can take in whatever happens, whether it's chaos, whether they stand pat. Hopefully they don't trade out of the first round, but we are super pumped for a week from Thursday night. He's Thor Nystrom. You can find him on Twitter at ThorKU and all of his work at Fantasy Pros and Betting Pros. Awesome stuff, Thor.
Appreciate it, boys. I always enjoyed joining you on Tuesdays.
Reckless draft speculation here on Purple Daily. Daily Vikings entertainment. We just want the Vikings to win a Super Bowl before we die.